Hello, and welcome to the Four Walls Theater YouTube channel. My name is Gina Drop, and I am the Associate Artistic Director of this theater that is so wonderfully founded by Alana Gartner, our founding artistic director and producer of all of the work that we do here at Four Walls Theater. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing Heather Harvey. She is our director for our upcoming production Bars by Praveen Wilkins, which will be live this October 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Pacific, and then again on October 18th for a matinee at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, and 11 a.m. Pacific, with a talkback to follow on the Sunday performance. If you would like to learn everything that you possibly can about this production of Bars, please visit our Eventbrite. You can find this through the Four Walls website at www.fourwalls.com, and that will have a link directly to the Eventbrite, or you can search for Four Walls Theater Presents Bars by Praveen Wilkins on the Eventbrite site. There you can donate in lieu of tickets, and if you donate before the beginning of the Sunday performance, then you can join us for an exclusive talkback with the artists after the performance. There you will be able to ask them questions about their journey in this production, how it relates to current events, and so much more. If you want to know more about our past productions, you can find all of that on our website, or you can find us on social media, including Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Heather, thank you so much for being here today. I can't wait to introduce Heather. She is a Brooklyn-based director, writer, producer who specializes in non-traditional storytelling for the stage, audio, and screen. She's one of the co-founders of Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop, where she collaborates and raises hell with some of New York City's most powerful Black artists. And when she's not staying the fuck inside, she's walking the cutest dog on this side of the Hudson River. Thank you so much for being here with me today, Heather.
Thanks for having me.
How are you doing? Well, that's a horrible question these days, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of puts you on the spot. I'm super excited to get to know so much more about you as a director. I've had the privilege in the rehearsal space for Four Walls to see you in action directing in this virtual platform, and it is truly impressive. So I'm excited to dig deep. Are you ready for the first question?
Sure.
Okay. So you specialize in non-traditional storytelling. Can you speak on your path as a director and how it's been working as a Black director in a largely white theater landscape?
Yeah, actually working as a Black director is part of the reason why I specialize in non-traditional storytelling. I had the privilege of working at Indianapolis Repertory Theater when I was about 17 to 18. And there I got to work with people like Bob Moss, who at the time was the producing artistic director at Syracuse Stage, and Tim Douglas. And I got to work in a theater environment that was led by dramaturgs. And I had a very Aristotelian understanding of theater structure and a really traditional and Western informed understanding of how to approach storytelling. And then when I went to college and had the opportunity to delve into non-traditional works and works that explicitly spotlighted Black stories, I realized that the way in which we were approaching theater was fundamentally not creating a space for us. And so that led me to focus on devised work. It led me to focus on works by, folks like Amiri Baraka and Ndazaki Shange, and also to find a community of artists who are willing to explore non-traditional aspects to represent things that were intrinsic to our culture, things like, how we're using music, how we're using ritual, syncretic expression. And I found that it can be a more honest way to tell our stories on stage.
Amazing. I've seen how all of that has bled into your work as directing Bars. And it's really beautiful the way you use all of these different skills, even in a traditional parts of the work, and then also it translates very beautiful to the non-traditional parts of the work. What led you to being a co-founder of the Black Revolutionary Theater Workshop?
One Sunday, actually 5 days after the massacre at Mother Emanuel AME, I joined with a bunch of other downtown-based artists in Manhattan, and we're supposed to be creating some sort of response. And I went to this event probably at least 60 people in the room. I look around, there's like 4 Black faces, and we can't stay on the topic of Blackness, racism, white supremacy. We can't talk about the things that are specific to this experience, specific to a legacy of white supremacist violence in the United States, specific to how different people are hurting. And that does such a disservice, not only to those who have explicitly experienced this trauma, but to people who are experiencing, being triggered by this trauma. And so I left and I took 75% of the Black people in the room with me, which sounds more like a flex than it is, because again, there were 4. So we left, we decided to create our own work, which was loosely inspired by some of just the dumbest conversations you will ever hear. At the time, there was a conversation going on in Fox News and in other sections of conservative media where people were insisting that Black activists, specifically in Black Lives Matter, were trying to create some sort of revolution. And the language around it was, intentionally incendiary, but at the same time, it was also intentionally skirting why we were talking about these things, what the results were that we were looking for, and frankly, what a revolution would actually look like. And so we created a piece called Revolution. And before we finished the play, we had our first commission. And so VRTW was mostly born out of, this frustration, needing to express ourselves, not really expecting to get work. And then once we did, we realized the opportunity that we had kind of stumbled upon. It wasn't just an opportunity for us as artists to talk about the things that were weighing most on us, but it was also an opportunity for us as artists to look at how we can create a haven for other Black artists, how Black artists' needs can be represented in the administration of an organization and the leadership of an organization, and how we, respect the labor that upholds that organization and moves it forward. And that's really what VRTW is today.
That's amazing. And anyone who's interested in learning more about VRTW can go to thevrtw.org. And they also have a wonderful Facebook group that has tons of information, or a Facebook page. So go ahead and definitely check that out for more information. I spent a long time looking at the website the other day, and I was really impressed with everything and all of the work that you guys are doing. So like I said before, I've had this amazing privilege of sitting in on rehearsals while you're directing bars, and it's a virtual space, so everyone is distanced, but there's so much community that you're building, and there's so much amazing work that you're doing pushing the script. From my perspective, when I'm watching you direct, one of the key elements of your directing style is the accessibility of your language that you use with the actors. How do you work with a script or prepare to find this very specific language to use with the actors? And has this work become harder or increased since we're living in such a stressful time right now?
In terms of finding the correct language, I start with a pretty traditional breakdown. I look at each of the scenes, what's happening, who wants what, how are they going about it, how are we shifting our tactics, what are, how did these various wants and objectives come together and create a narrative in a full sense. Outside of that, in casting, I look a bit for how people communicate. Not necessarily as an indicator of whether or not I want to work with someone, but to give me a sense of how I need to best shift how I might naturally communicate in order to be understood. And so the way in which I practice directing comes from a variety of experiences, partially in, being surrounded in theater nerd spaces for too long, but also taking facilitation trainings and working in ways to create community, whether there's 2 people in the room or whether there's 200 people in the room or 2,000 people in the room. So the thing that I look for is, how do we make sure that everyone feels represented, safe, creative, and free? And I actually ask people in the first day of rehearsals, what creates that space for you? How do we all know and create a contract with each other that we can have that space that is safe, creative, and expressive and free? And that's something that we all have to show up for and commit to each and every day. And I think if we set the expectation that this is a contract that we all share with each other, generally people stand by it. And then, the more you talk to people, the more you express with each other. We have our check-ins right at the beginning of rehearsal. We have another practice called Fucking Hooray, which I borrowed from My Favorite Murder at the end of rehearsal. to get a sense of how people are just doing and what they're bringing into rehearsal, but that also gives you an opportunity to hear how people express themselves. And then that gives me an opportunity to mirror that language so that when we're working through some of these really tough scenes and we're delving into the most vulnerable aspects of our character, we can do it in a way that we're not overextending ourselves just to understand each other. And then with regard to whether or not that's gotten harder or easier, oddly enough, I feel the practice has become more frequent, but it's definitely gotten more difficult since the pandemic. I think we're all going through so much and we're in such a constant state of challenge that we struggle with expressing ourselves to ourselves, let alone being able to express ourselves to each other. And on top of that, we live in this culture that incentivizes this warped idea of productivity as if we live in a meritocracy. And so we're all working and working and working and trying to work through everything that we're going through instead of stopping and taking a pause and taking an inventory. This is what I'm bringing to this space. But that said, I think a rehearsal space is a really great opportunity to encourage people to stop and take that inventory in community.
Wonderful. And I definitely have seen all of this that you're talking about. I love knowing about the workshops that you've done and the training you've done on facilitating. That's such a wonderful idea for all directors to do. I can see how that has definitely translated into what you're doing, and it's very powerful. For this specific production and of bars and in general for productions, we have a full cast of principal actors, and then we have a full understudy cast. And the reason that we've done that is something that we do at Four Walls all of the time is we've always started out with having a swing so that should technical difficulties happen, someone can step in. And that started out in our first show as one swing. And then the next show we had one swing, but that was slightly more versatile for what we were looking for. And then the third show, we had two swings that could fit into kind of different roles that we needed them in. And then for this show, each character is so extremely important. We said we want to understudy every single role to give them a full opportunity, but to also have every single character completely covered. Now, you have taken that opportunity to a completely different level than I think we ever knew was going to happen. And it is incredible because you are directing both of these casts as if they're both principal casts, and you work with them and let them take their characters. You let the actors take their characters in the direction that that individual feels that the character needs to go. So there are moments that this is almost like you're directing two entirely different shows. What is that like? Can you speak on what it's like to cross direct in these times? Like it must be so much to balance and keep in check, but still tell the journey of a story that you're doing. It just seems amazing. Can you just talk a little bit about doing the work of those two cast pieces?
Yeah, I mean, my fundamental philosophy on collaborating in theater is that we work with the people that we're working with because we trust them. And hopefully that will, cross over into every place that we work. But, I'm casting actors, but essentially we're hiring people and we're hiring them because they're capable. And two different people can be capable of expressing the full range of character in two very different ways. And so I want to allow for that. And also, I think one of the building blocks of acting is just being able to go after what you want, listen, and respond. And so if we have everyone together and we trust that they can all tell these stories and we trust that they all can go after what they want in these scenes and listen to their scene partners and respond accordingly, I see no reason why I should be superimposing something external onto these characters when I'm surrounded by a bunch of extremely competent, capable, and talented professionals. And I've also had the opportunity to see when understudy directing goes poorly, which has influenced the way that I approach understudies. When I have the opportunity and I'm with a producing house that has the resources to give me a full cast of understudies, I'm a big believer in treating your understudies like they're your first string. Because at the end of the day, they're a heartbeat away from being that first string. So in
Yeah.
my mind, they should have the same amount of rehearsal. They should have the same amount of focus. They should be pushed as much as the first string because they're almost equally responsible for that narrative, even if we never see them. So that's my general philosophy on it.
I love it. I know the actors love it, and it's also a very cool way. I think we all know, if you are immersed in theater life, you know that a script can be produced 100 different times by 100 different companies, and it's going to look different every time. But to see it look different at the same time in action is so fun and really makes you think about the way that characters can be interpreted and stories can be interpreted. It's so cool. My last question for you, and then we'll have some time to take questions from our live audience. If you are watching right now, you can type your comments and questions into the chat, and they will be reported back to us, and we'll talk about them. But I'm going to have one more question for Heather, and I want to know what do you find most important about bars? And what do you hope that audiences will take away from watching it?
I'm going to cheat and say I have more than one most important thing to take away.
Okay.
The first most important thing is we need to interrogate how we civically engage. And I hope that's going to be a recurring theme of 2020 in various media outlets. But we know that we're facing a really important national election, but what we can't forget is the import of our local politics. Our local politics shape so much of our everyday lives, and many of us don't engage with it. So for me, the thing that I really want people to walk away from is this idea that you can be just as invested in your local politics. The second thing that I find equally important is the full life of a Black woman. I am so sick of seeing Black women be martyred. I am so sick of seeing Black women's pain being perverted. I am so sick of seeing Black women be a two-dimensional superwoman. We have a Black woman at the center of this play who is hurting, who is powerful, who is loving, who is nurturing, who has ambition and has had to sacrifice her ambition. She is a fully well-rounded person. And so I think that is so extremely important in this moment, that we all walk away from the idea that, one, Black women aren't here just to fit conveniently within boxes. Two, they're human. And three, we all have a responsibility to recognize that Black women are human. This play was written by Praveen, who is not Black, and he can still recognize that Black women are three-dimensional people. So that's the other thing that I want people to walk away from or walk away with.
Excellent. I really hope that all of you guys tune in to watch Bars this weekend and get to see the beautiful writing of Praveen Wilkins and the beautiful directing of Heather Harvey and this amazing cast of actors. We are going to take some questions now. There's a bit of a lag between us and YouTube. So if we get a little bit of lag right in between questions, I'll just ask Heather some more stuff or key you guys in on more information. But we have a question already. And that is, how did you first approach Bars? Whoops, I'm cutting my question off. As a script before the actors entered the room. How does the product now square up with your initial view?
That's interesting. I really like to dissect the text. So I disrespected a couple of notebooks. Allocated a couple of pages per scene. And the first thing that I did is just go through each scene and get a sense of narrative. Just what story is each scene telling me? Who is coming in and out of each scene? Where are the shifts in mode? And who wants what? Why do they want what? Does it connect to something that's happening elsewhere? And then I draw a line and then I make some dramaturgical notes. My entry into theater was through dramaturgy. And dramaturgy still informs the way that I break down text. And so then I start doing my research and start looking into what was happening in Oklahoma at this point, what was happening, in Canada at this point, what was happening in Hungary at this point. And that influences some of how I break that down. And then I disrespect some more pages in my notebook. And I say disrespect because my handwriting is a crime. It's terrible. But then I go to another page in my notebook and I start drawing some conclusions and checking out the notes that are in the text about where a director can really start to take charge of the narrative. And so Praveen has a note at the beginning about Alex, who's a district attorney, intended color, but the director can choose what this character's race is. But the understanding isn't that, you know, this is race blind in any way, shape, or form. It has to be an intentional choice. It has to inform the narrative. It has to be supported by something. And so as I'm going through and reading, that's one of the things that I have in mind. So in terms of where the story is now and where it squares with the text work, it feels more developed. I can't say that it feels like anything completely different has necessarily happened. It feels like a natural evolution from that text work.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And as we wait for another question to come to us, oh, we have one. I do want to make just a quick announcement that the spotlighted charity for this production is The Keepers. We are boosting The Keepers for this production. They're a wonderful organization, and you can find out more about them at followthekeepers.org. And we also have a link to that from our website and on our social media. So please check them out. Our next question is, Zoom is an entirely new medium. How do you think you take principle of non-traditional storytelling into it?
I think Zoom lends itself really well to non-traditional storytelling. I mean, it's forcing an entire industry to be non-traditional. I also think one of the benefits of Zoom, especially as somebody with a background in non-traditional storytelling, is that you tend to spend a lot of time at the margins of various art forms, whether it's like visual arts and theater or theater and film and dance. And so for me, Zoom feels like a middle ground between film and theater. And it's a really great opportunity to use the things that you're more concerned about in film and remind your actors of that in this particular medium. But also it's a great opportunity to remind actors that they still get to use their imaginations in a way that they're sometimes not invited to. So we have scenes in which a character is delivering spoken word in this very impassioned way. And the understanding is that they're in a theater when it's taking place. And if you're directing this for the stage, maybe they're looking for the energy of their audience, and translating to Zoom can sometimes be difficult for live actors because we have a symbiotic relationship with our audience. And with this, a lot of the effort in the directing of the piece has come to who's in the audience. Who are you talking to in the audience? Talk to the people in the nosebleeds. You know, who are you feeling like in this particular moment? And growing that sense of the world around you. And so it's a little bit of your actors have to suspend their disbelief just as much as your audience normally has to.
Right.
But I think it lends itself really, really well. It's not as much of a leap as, say, you know, using like face masking or something throughout the entire performance. There are definitely weirder things taking place, but I think it still accommodates a lot of exploration, which is at the heart of non-traditional storytelling.
Definitely. Our Eventbrite is linked below the video if you would like to go and look at that. And also our website, go ahead and check that out for past production information and current production information. Our next question is, you addressed this a little bit before, they say, but how did you manage and take care of the emotions and sometimes genuine trauma that this play brings up while still pushing the actors? Oh, this is a great question.
Yeah, this is one of those places where I'm a big believer in facilitation trainings for directors. And fortunately, as a field, theater is improving a bit in how we understand consent. I'm a big believer in checking in with our actors when we're asking them to push themselves. And one of the things that I do with all of our actors, when I see that they're doing that work and they're sharing that vulnerable place with us, which is such a generous but also vulnerable situation for our actors to put themselves in, I check in with them and say, how are you feeling? Do you have another one in you? Do you need a break? and I honor the response. And there are times when people might say, hey, I can do this again, or I feel up to it. And you have to be the person to make that executive decision and say, I need you to take a break.
Right.
So there's that aspect of it, of just doing the work on a regular basis that isn't just about telling someone that it's a safe space, but actually creating check-ins for yourself to ensure that you're making it a safe space. And then in terms of pushing the actors, I like to think that I'm not pushing them so much as encouraging them to be more honest. I don't want to force anyone to express a version of trauma just because I understand it better. I also don't want to force anyone to express a version of trauma just because audiences have seen it a lot. I think this has led to some of the worst habits of our field. What I'd rather do is trust that we've hired people who already have a depth of human experience and emotional vulnerability and generosity, that they will give us the fullness of that honest experience. And then I just encourage them to tell that story. And so whether it's checking in with them either in notes in real time, via email, or chatting them saying, do you feel this was honest? Where do you feel this broke down a little bit? I see you protecting yourself. I see you defending yourself. What gives you more permission to be more honest in these moments? Those are the check-ins I deeply value in these moments.
I want to comment on something that you do as well that I've been like, I really love this, is you have the actors talk as the characters in conversation after scene work a lot. And I think that I've seen such a huge contrast in that conversation and how much work you can get done in a rehearsal by letting them know that they don't have to comment on their performance. You want them to talk about, as that character, what are you feeling in this moment? And there is so much truth that's discovered quicker using that method. And I think it's just brilliant. Oh, yes, I do want to go ahead and remind everyone to use your voice, take action, make a plan, and go to www.vote.org if you need more information about voting in your area. BARS centers around this idea of upcoming elections, how we use our voice in these elections, and who we put in office. We would love to encourage everyone to please get out there and vote, use your voice, and go to www.vote.org, or go to Vogue first, then go to vote.org and get a voting plan. Know what your plan is, know what your backup plan is, and what's happening in your area, depending on where you live. All right. And we have another question, and we'll probably take a few more and then wrap up soon. What is your vision for the future of theater right now? That's a hard question.
Ooh, that's a whole different interview. I have lots of vision, and frankly, it starts with labor. We have a problem in this industry where we take people for granted with the assumption that just because you're a creative, the gift is that you get to do what you love.
Mm-hmm.
Vulnerable work. It's extremely work at times. Sometimes we're asking people to get naked. We're asking people to kiss. We're asking people to simulate and often re-trigger themselves for some of the worst experiences of your life. Also, as a writer, I know that it's like playing The Sims sometimes. You are putting these people who are fascinating and comprehensive, full humans through the worst things they will ever experience in about 90 minutes to 2 hours. And then you expect these people to be okay and pay them not a living wage. That's trash. So we need to standardize the idea that we pay people a reasonable wage for their work. And we recognize that we're putting people in an extremely vulnerable situation when they're telling these stories. Secondly, we need to get out of this starting the conversation industrial complex bullshit. It is not enough to come to your audience as a theater and say, we're talking about something important. We did our job, virtue signal, virtue signal. No. Use your platform to tell your audience how they can civically engage. Whether it's what Gina just did, telling people where they can actually go to create their voting plan, whether it's putting people in contact with the thought leaders, organizers, and organizations in their communities to ensure that they can help co-create a more just, equitable, sustainable, and healthy environment, whether it's allowing people to recognize that there is more than you can do, more that you can do than vote with your dollar. But you can also figure out how you allocate your time, where your resources come from. There's such an opportunity that theaters have with their captive audience that is disproportionately skewed upper middle class, wealthy, and white to make our communities healthier, more intentional places. And then the last thing I would do, although it's equally important, is I would look at leadership. We have a lot of people who've kind of failed upward into leadership of theater companies. A lot of times it's people who had the resources to decide that they didn't want to exist in the normal work race. We have a lot of people who had the opportunities to take advantage of resources that just are not available to the rest of the American populace. And we have a lot of people who don't have to interrogate their own internalized, cis heteronormativity, patriarchy, racism, fat phobia, you name it, you name it, you name it. And then it trickles down into our seasons and who we hire. We need to see more diverse and non-hierarchical forms of leadership. And that leadership also needs to be shifted in our boards of directors. Oh, and I'd also take a look at why so many of our theaters exist in the format in which they do. A lot of them are these 501c3 entities in which you're dependent on having these earned income streams of income in forms of ticketing and also in forms of donation. Why aren't more theaters partnering with educational institutions? Why aren't more theaters figuring out how, they can diversify their various income streams? Yeah, there are a million things worth changing in theater.
And I want to hear a whole lot more from you, but that's the time that we have today. Thank you so much for spending your time here, letting me pick your brain about your path of becoming the incredible director that you are today. And everyone, come in and tune in to watch Bars October 17th and 18th. You can check out all of the information on times, where to show up, how to donate on our Eventbrite. The link is underneath this video. You can also find all of this information on the Four Walls Theater, and that's theater with an ER.com. We have everything linked there as well. It'll take you to the Eventbrite. You can go to the Eventbrite itself, whatever you want to do. Read up on this show and then come and hang out with us and watch it and donate to have a chance to come and talk to the actors and the production team and all of our artists in the talk back after the show on Sunday. Thank you so much for your time, and always come and watch more stuff on the Four Walls Theater YouTube channel. I'm Gina, and this is Heather, and she's